Welcome, fellow confidence crusaders, neuro nerds, and success equalizers. This is your podcast, Real Confidence. I'm your host, Alyssa DeVere, and I'll be sharing a bit of basic brain science, some surprising social secrets, and a touch of tough love. Why? Because I believe confidence is everyone's fundamental right and choice. So let's get to it. I'm going to read this bio, and I admit when I first read it, I had a little bit of a confidence shake-up myself because I got the honor, and I mean that sincerely, to meet this woman, Rebecca Yang, not too long ago. And her background, she has a master's in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. She graduated magna cum laude from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. And she has been a force in corporate world as an inclusion activist leader in places like, just saying, Amazon Web Services, Facebook, and the US State Department, let alone Harvard. So that was all in that confidence like shakeup I had. And then I was like, you're proficient in Turkish and Mandarin Chinese, and you're learning Japanese and German. I mean, come on, girl. I love you more than I can possibly love even maybe my children. Amazing. So thank you for being here today, but we're not going to be talking about almost any of that. And I say almost because it's all related to what we are going to talk about. But you were a US diplomat in Istanbul, and you were covering elections, political, domestic politics, human rights, and religious freedom. That's a lot there too. So I want to really dive into that. You lived through a coup attempt and terrorist attacks and all kinds of like, oh my gosh, moments featured in the president's daily brief. I mean, seriously, like I'm so excited that you're here. Tell me a little bit, and the audience, what does a diplomat do? And share a little bit of your story in Turkey.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Thanks so much for having me on this podcast. So I'll just back up and talk a little bit about why I wanted to become a diplomat. That's a question that I often get. And so my story there is it really stems from my identity being Chinese American. So my parents grew up during China's Cultural Revolution, and they had it was a very difficult time for many Chinese people during those decades. And that experience for my mom and dad was really impactful for them. So their generation lost out on an education. All schools in China were shut down for 10 years. My stepdad had to go to the countryside and do hard manual labor. And meanwhile, my mother's side of the family was ostracized because her father was Kuomintang, associated with the Kuomintang party, which was considered bourgeoisie. And so my grandfather had to wear a black patch on his arm at the time. And so when the Cultural Revolution ended, my mom went to go work at a taro factory as China as a country was opening up and economic reforms were happening under Deng Xiaoping. But that was really all that was available to her. And she said, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. To this day, she still hates taro because it made her hands really rough. And so that's why she immigrated to the United States. So when I was born in upstate New York, I heard a lot of stories in my childhood about how difficult my parents' times in China, how difficult they were, but really grateful and thankful that they came to a country where there were more opportunities. And so having that global mindset from the very beginning of my life is really what propelled me to think about what would it be like if I were a bridge between two countries? My entire life, I felt like a bridge between the United States and China. Growing up, sometimes it felt like I was misunderstood by both countries, whether that was at school, people who didn't understand my background, the food that I was bringing. I didn't speak English until I was 5, but then I absorbed it like a sponge when I went to school. These were the stories, the experiences that really shaped me. So when I went to college at Georgetown University, an institution that is really well known for teaching international relations, Secretary Albright was one of my professors there. It just seemed like a natural fit. So one of my mentors there encouraged me to apply for a fellowship called the Pickering Fellowship, which is basically promoting young people into the Foreign Service, encouraging them to join. And so I joined through that program. I won that fellowship my junior year in college, and it helped pay for graduate school. I needed the financial aid. And then I passed all the tests that are required to become a diplomat, and then I was able to join. And so that's sort of the short story of why I wanted to become a diplomat. And so to your question of what do diplomats do? Diplomats formulate and implement US foreign policy. And so that is in one sentence what diplomats do. There are different functions that diplomats play around the world. So some of them are consular officers, so dealing with visas, interviewing visa applicants, people who want to visit the United States, taking care of US citizens who are overseas, births, deaths, other celebrations. There are also management officers who are in charge of making sure that our facilities worldwide are operating as they should. Political officers, which I was, who cover different political issues in their host country that they're serving in, economic issues for certain economic issues, and finally, public affairs officer, who are basically liaising with the press, and then also managing our citizen diplomacy programs, such as the Fulbright program, IVLP, the International Visitors Leadership Program. So two-way cultural and educational exchange between the United States and other countries. So my first and only tour was serving as a political officer in Istanbul, Turkey. Now, I was there from 2016 to 2018. I learned Turkish for about 6 months before I went, in addition to receiving other training in DC. And I was basically just kind of thrown into the fire my first week. So I was managing the US presidential delegation's visit to the UN World Humanitarian Summit my first week on the job. That was a really hectic, really rewarding experience. There at that time, highest number of Syrian refugees were in Istanbul. And so there was a city that was very much on the front lines of a humanitarian crisis. There were numerous terrorist attacks that occurred while I was there. The triple ISIS suicide attack in June 2016. 2 weeks after that was the coup attempt in July 2016. That was when a faction of the Turkish military tried to overthrow the government there. That was a very scary time. And my heart went out to Turks and the country who were experiencing this horrible experience. The security situation quickly deteriorated after that. Unfortunately, Turkey blamed the United States for the coup attempt, and so we saw a rise in anti-Americanism, and then we had a mandatory evacuation at the consulate due to increased threats against us. So we were operating with fewer people at the consulate, morale was low, and it was a difficult time. And we have movement restrictions as well, which meant that we could not go to certain places because they may be at risk of an attack. So I covered human rights, elections, religious freedom, domestic politics. That was my portfolio there. So I loved my work. My day-to-day involved talking to human rights activists, women rights activists, children rights activists, talking to LGBTI rights activists, talking to all the different religious minorities of Turkey, the chief rabbi of Turkey, for example, the Armenian patriarch, the ecumenical patriarch, and meeting with the different political parties and just really trying to understand what is their experience right now in Turkey? What is their community going through? Where do they need support from the United States? What future do they see for themselves and their community in the country? And so, because this country was going through so much during the time that I served there, every community, was thankful to have someone listen to them, but also they needed a lot. It was a period of rapid and tremendous change. And so there certainly can be a lot of uncertainty and fear that comes from that change. And so, I was the person on the ground, eyes and ears on the ground, listening to these communities. Another part of my job that I was really proud to do was representing and fighting for press freedom. So I would be representing the United States when I would go to the courthouse when there was a trial for journalists, for example, or imprisoned human rights activists, and be, representing with other EU countries. We stand for press freedom here. So that was some part of my job as well. So it was a very hectic tour, but it was incredibly meaningful. I really care about these issues. They're fundamental to democracy, to human rights, to what the United States stand for. And that's why my parents immigrated to the United States. So it was a huge honor for me to be able to represent that and do that work as a diplomat overseas.
Wow. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to want to rewind that and listen to that story multiple times. There were so many fascinating bits in there. And I know it was like kind of a summary, and I can't even imagine experiencing that. I honestly, and when I said, you read a bio like yours, and I am so proud that somebody like you can go do this kind of work, but I'm going to throw a curveball at you for a second, because with all your accomplishments and accolades, you were young when you were there. You're still young, but you were young then. And you just said you were had to listen, you had to kind of be almost a mature uh, caregiver in a lot of cases to all these people who needed that additional support. And I'm wondering, were there moments, you remember moments where you're like, what am I doing here? Do I have imposter syndrome? Do I have the intelligence, the wherewithal, the resources? Like, were you questioning your own ability to do that work?
Alyssa, that's such a great question. And I've talked a lot about and sometimes have felt imposter syndrome throughout my life. But I have to say that in certain environments, you don't have time. There's no room to think about imposter syndrome. There's just no space for it to even come in. And I would say that my experience in Istanbul, and also another experience I know we'll talk about as well, the Afghanistan evacuation, there are certain situations in life where you don't have time to doubt yourself. You don't have time to question. All you have time for is you feel this sense of urgency and this sense of mission, and it's all encompassing, and it's just driving you forward. At least for me, that is what I felt. I did not have time to doubt myself as I was, running from rubber bullets or trying to flee an attack. I don't have time. I just need to run, and my feet need to take me far. And I need to figure out, how do I communicate the right information to my government back home? That's all I have the energy for. And I think anything that's not that is a waste of time, and it's not fulfilling the mission at hand. So there are certain situations in life, I think, where I didn't have time for it. I will say, though, during my transition to tech, I felt that a little bit. I felt some imposter syndrome. I did experience that. And I would say in graduate school, going straight from undergraduate from Georgetown straight into the Kennedy School, I think that transition was when I felt the most imposter syndrome in my life. I went from, graduating as a 22-year-old to suddenly my classmates were former presidents of major, very populous countries. And I felt completely out of my league. So that was early training for me in, how to deal with that. And it wasn't easy. But there's sometimes it doesn't go away. There's sometimes absolutely you can doubt yourself. And then you might be thrown into certain situations where you don't even have time to doubt yourself. So it's a mix. It's a mix. But I think the more you go through different life experiences, especially the ones that challenge you, and the more you realize that, yes, I can come through on the other side, and I did a pretty good job, and I did the best that I could, then, and you show that grace to yourself, you realize this is something I can manage, and that these are natural feelings, and there's no shame in feeling these things. It's, try your best with the information that you have and the people around you. You came out on the other side, and the repeat experience of that is what will help you manage, these feelings of imposter syndrome or self-doubt that you may have.
I really appreciate that vulnerability. I would go, I completely agree, and couldn't have said it better. I think there's also a subtle message in here that no matter what your formal education, no matter what you study, there's going to be situations where you just can't prepare for everything. And I wonder if there was a moment, particularly in Istanbul, and we will get into Afghanistan in just a moment, but was there a particular moment in Istanbul, because you were a respected authority, that you were like, I don't know what the heck to do? And then how did you get through that?
There's a moment. It's a bit of a funny story. So during the UN World Humanitarian Summit, this was my first week on the ground. I still had jet lag, so I was still operating on Washington, D.C. Eastern time. But I was thrown into managing the U.S. presidential delegation's visit to the summit. So all the world leaders were coming together in Istanbul for the summit. I saw Angela Merkel walking around, like everybody was there. And it was 2 a.m. Istanbul time. And I had, it was a diplomat from an African country who came up to me and asked me where he could find a fax machine. And first of all, I'm a millennial, so I have never worked with a fax machine before in my life. I know they exist. I've never used one before. And I had to find a Turkish fax machine to help this diplomat send an urgent message. So I just had to be very scrappy. And I looked up, first I looked up like Google image fax machine. What does this look like? And then I
I love this.
And then I came up with a Turkish word, fax machine. Okay. And I just asked around, like, where can we find a fax machine? Where can we find a fax machine? And finally we found one and was able to help this diplomat. And yeah, was able to help this diplomat. But that was a situation where I have no idea. No situation in my life could have prepared me for this moment, other than just being very scrappy and just trying my best in a situation. Yeah, so
Yeah, no, so they
that was
didn't
one.
teach you about fax machines at the Harvard Public Policy School now, right?
Yeah.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing. And so as I'm giggling here, because you're absolutely right. It's funny, but there is, such a lesson in there that, brilliance and preparation. And here it was a fax machine that kind of took you down
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh no, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Despite all the other things that could have gone sideways. But we're going to get serious a moment now because you have this experience in Afghanistan, and I'm sure listeners, you might have your own opinions, but please listen to this with an open heart and an open mind because Rebecca's experience is extraordinary. Rebecca, how and why and what?
Sure. So thank you for letting me discuss this. So I was heavily involved with the Afghanistan evacuation, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in August 2021. So I have joined the Truman National Security Project as a National Security Fellow. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization based in Washington, D.C., with many fellows across the country who were former national security practitioners, veterans, and other political professionals. And we're really united by our common values of supporting democracy, human rights overseas, and protecting U.S. national security. So it was really through this organization that I was able to have an impact and was able to work on this evacuation. So many Truman Fellows like myself saw what was going on with the evacuation and thought to ourselves, this is not okay. A lot of my veteran friends who are Truman Fellows, they said, this is a moral injury to leave my interpreters behind, to leave, the way that we're leaving in the war that I fought in. This is not okay. We have to do something. We have to get as many people out as possible. So a lot of us just felt very passionate about this and like, I've got to do something. And, from my experience, I've never served in Afghanistan. I've only served in Istanbul, but I felt so compelled to do something because one, I mentioned before, I'm a daughter of immigrants. We came here for, the United States values, upholding those values, and how we were evacuating did not align with those values at all. And that really bothered me. And so that was one. Two, I actually represented the United States overseas and upheld these values of, press freedom and human rights and rule of law. And my service needed to mean something. I needed to see my country stand up and do the right thing here. And three, it just on a human level, we can't abandon people who serve with us, who we promised we would get out when we left. And so we have to uphold our promises. Otherwise, what does our word mean anymore on the world stage? So I just felt very compelled to get involved. And the Truman Organization, they'd sent out an email to all Truman say, hey, we need some volunteers to help us with data entry, helping us create flight manifests for Afghans who want to get out, and to be able to connect that last mile of like flights are leaving empty, and that's a shame because we know that there's so many people who want to get out. We need to connect the Afghans on the ground with the flights who are leaving. So I thought, if I can do simple data entry and it helps with that problem, let me do it. And so I remember sending them an email and putting my best foot forward. And I was like, I'm a fast typist. I'm very organized. I love spreadsheets. May I please help? And they're like, of course, please help. Come on. And so I joined this volunteer effort, and it was just a few of us in the beginning. But with my global operations experience in tech that I've had so far at Facebook's Global Trust and Safety team, and then at Amazon, I could see that what we currently had, the infrastructure that we currently had, was not enough to meet the demands of the situation. We had a few people working a couple hours in a Zoom room and then done. No, there's going to be exponential demand for people who want to get out in the next few days, over the next week. I was like, we need to set up a 24/7 Zoom room. We need worldwide coverage, not just some volunteers in the United States. We need to set up a protocol and be able to do this at scale. And we need translation teams because we were creating these boarding passes to let people know your plane is right here, leaving here, going to this country. And I need a communication team to send these, WhatsApp and other messages to people on the ground as well. And so I basically just wrote the SOP, started training people. I asked my VP at Amazon to assist me with this. She asked if she could help. I said, I need at least 50 spreadsheet savvy people from all over the world to help me with my flight manifest operations team. So I basically just created a massive global flight manifest operations team, trained them myself, and then I trained the trainers who managed each of these geographic regions, created multiple translation teams, and was just started scaling up in hours. I mean, it was really just in a span of hours. And every second brought exponentially new demands and crises, things you would never, think to prepare for. But I always made sure, one, that I tried to lead with empathy and that everyone knew who they were coming to our volunteer effort. They knew that our primary goal, above all else, our primary goal was to save lives, as many lives as possible. And the second principle was that we were not going to separate families. Unfortunately, the State Department was doing that. And I said, we are not going to do that. Everyone who is a family unit, cousins, aunts, brothers in Afghanistan, and very large families, they're all going to be marked together in the spreadsheet, and they will not be separated on flights. So they go together as a unit. So those were some of the key principles that I made sure everybody knew. It was baked into our SOPs. And yeah, it was just execution. I just over and over again. And every time we learned something new from a particular plane that we were manifesting, I would make sure that we'd incorporate that into our processes. So it was constant iteration, improvement. And we just did that over and over again until we hit August 31st, which is when the United States officially withdrew from Afghanistan. So that was just 24/7 over the span of a week and a half of no sleep. And we ended up getting over 1,000 Afghans, US citizens, on 7 private charters out of Afghanistan. Our CFO at AWS heard about my work and mentioned our team's work at the company All Hands, said, Rebecca, Truman National Security Project, over 50 Amazonians helped out in this effort, helped save over 1,000 people. That led to Amazon's legal team reaching out and saying, we have an Amazonian who is stuck in Afghanistan along with his fiance. The State Department is not responding. We heard about your story at the All Hands. Would you be able to help? And using the network that I had created, the processes that I had created from scratch, was able to get this Amazonian and his fiance out. And so then I used that one to try to secure additional funding to make this work more sustainable for Truman in the future. So then created the first strategic partnership between Amazon Web Services, and Truman so that we could continue this life-saving work moving forward. And I did need to get back to my job at AWS. So, but that was the most difficult experience I've had in my life, but also by far the most meaningful, the most important work I've ever done. And it also, speaking about imposter syndrome, it made me realize undoubtedly that I'm a really good leader in a crisis. And somehow I ran toward this situation and I had no idea that I would end up, building this team of hundreds of people and, doing this work. If you told me that my data entry job that I had signed up for initially, I'm a fast typist, all the way to, to the end, that's what would happen. You can't predict these things, but it was a very fast moving situation. And it was like I don't know. It was a really meaningful experience. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing all of that. I'm every word I'm hanging on because you are an amazing human. And nobody's ever told you that. Let me be the first to say thank you for not only sharing with the listeners, but also everything that you've done. People often probably stop the soldiers going on planes and say thank you for your service, but you have won some awards, but the service that you did and you just described here, I don't even think that we can thank you enough. So thank you. But we're not done with talking. So I'm not letting you go yet. I'm not going to thank you for being on the pod just yet, because we got another question coming at you. And we're going to take a very quick sponsor break, but I want to know, through all of this experience, and again, it's undermining what it is, you came out the other side. Like, how did it change the way you look at life? How does it change the way you go forward? Is there a profound lesson that you can share with everyone? Because I don't think anyone has the same kind of experience even close to that you did. And I'd love to hear your words of wisdom. So we'll be right back. Want to level up your confidence, your career? maybe even your coaching? Well, then head over to AmericanConfidenceInstitute.com. E-classes are there, as well as our coaching certification program, and you don't need any coaching experience to do it. However, if you are an experienced coach, you can get ICF and SHRM continuing credit. It's fast and easy. If you work in an organization, consider bringing in a kick-ass keynote or a uniquely engaging workshop. We also have team learning programs, and they all apply to both your personal and professional life, which makes them really special. They're great for ERGs, the leaders, the member programming, or really any type of professional learning and development in your organization. So give us a holler at www.americanconfidenceinstitute.com. I am floored and honored and gracious. And Rebecca, for you to be here and sharing all that experience with us in a kind of story forum, I'm beyond words, which is unusual for me. But I'm going to ask you for some of your own words now that you've had an opportunity in life to kind of reflect on all of this that you've experienced. And, what is kind of your takeaway, really? What have you learned? What is your mantra really going forward in the world now?
I would say my mantra going forward in the world has always been and will continue to be live your values. And the reason why I say that is because your values are the only thing that will anchor you in the midst of change. And I think, especially in the last few years, COVID and all of its changes that have come from as a result of COVID, there's so much uncertainty out there in the world. And I know from my own experience that people respond to uncertainty and to change in different ways. Some people can take advantage of it. They're really excited about it. Oftentimes it sparks fear in people. And so the only thing that you can do as an individual is to know your own values and to live them out every day in small ways, in big ways, because they will anchor you in the midst of all this change. And life really is change. It's all about change. In the tech world that I've been in, there's change all the time. In diplomacy, things were changing on the ground all the time. And certainly through the Afghanistan experience, it felt like every second there was some new crises and something new was happening. And so, people who can adapt to change and be resilient through it, the thing that's helped me is knowing what my values are and living them out every day. That was what got me through the Afghanistan crisis. That was what got me through my time serving as a diplomat overseas. And, it's gotten me through my time in tech as well. Why am I here? What am I doing this for? So living your values, that's one. I found that crises in particular are really good at sorting out who does live their values and who doesn't. You'll often see two camps, people who abandon their values in times of crisis. Everything they've said before, it no longer holds true. They're doing the complete opposite. And you'll see other people who double down on their values. Everything they've said before, they mean it, and they're putting, their words to action. And so crises are often really good at sorting out, who abandons their values and who doubles down. The last thing I'll say is that one mantra that I have for this year is mood follows action. And I think confidence, and whatever it is that we want to feel about our life, it comes from experience and it comes from doing. We can't think our way to being motivated. We can't think our way to becoming confident. It's something that we feel after experience and knowing that we came out on the other side still here. And I did that. And, I'm still here. So it comes from doing things repeatedly and testing yourself and coming out on the other side. And just a small non-crisis example of that, I have been doing a lot of strength training this past year. I've been really focused on my health. And so I started doing these Caroline Gervan workout programs on YouTube. She's a strength training fitness instructor on YouTube. All her workouts are free on YouTube. And I'm not getting sponsored for this in any way. I just really love her workouts. I have been following her program since last April. And in the beginning, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't lift these heavy weights that she's lifting. This is a lot of work. And oh my gosh. And now I am meeting her weights or exceeding them. And I look forward to doing her workouts. And the first thing that I do every morning. So my mood about working out followed just repeatedly doing her workouts every day. And now it's just a part of who I am. It's part of my identity. I'm a Gervinator. I love her workouts. Yeah.
Well, I love you. I'm a Yanginator. Does that work? I don't know. Rebecca, I'm sure there's people who are listening that would love to send a note of at least thanks. If not, maybe reach out and find a way to learn more about your work with you. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best way to do that would be to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Feel free to shoot me a message, Rebecca Yang, and the headline will say AWS, former US diplomat, ex-Facebook, something like that. So yeah,
Great.
in a red shirt.
And a red shirt. I love
Yeah.
it. Again, thank you for everything that you've done for this country. Thank you for everything you're doing for all those that you've served. Thank you for being on my podcast. And thank you for just being a new friend, because some days I feel the luckiest on the planet. And today's one of those, having this opportunity to chat with you and be connected. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, Alyssa, and just letting me share my story.
Anytime. Thanks. Before we totally wrap up, I want to let you know that full transcripts and show notes for this and other Real Confidence episodes can be found on www.americanconfidenceinstitute.com/podcast. I also want to remind you once again that the best way to get confidence is to give it to others, and you can do it just by liking and sharing this episode on your preferred podcast and social media channels. You can even give me some confidence by noting topics you'd like me to consider for the future. So for now, this is Alyssa DeVere. Thank you for helping to bring more confidence to the world. Master editing done by Ben Weinstein, with original music performed and composed by Jeff Mitchell. Real Confidence is a production of American Confidence Institute. All rights reserved.